welcome to episode 2 of Setting the Hook, the show where we read the first chapter of 3 novels and dive into the writing devices used by authors to keep readers turning the page. Let's get into it. If you frequent Royal Road and haven't been living under a rock, you've likely seen this new craze over the past month around Monster Girl Evolution. Originally, I thought, maybe it was a meme or some sort of manipulation of the Royal Road algorithm. Truly, I hadn't paid it much mind, but late last night, my curiosity got the better of me. It started under the guise of me doing some investigative journalism for the channel. But after picking a fiction off the Rising Stars and reading a chapter, I have to say I'm sort of hooked on this premise. So this first review is going to be about that fiction. So let's get into it. The Speed of Light, aka Horsegirl Evolution by Tachyon Rudolf. This is the story of a sentient horse named Tachyon. And as with all good stories about sentient horses, this one begins with her enslaved and in a real bad situation. Tachyon finds herself enslaved and trapped in a monster fighting ring where humans and even some asshole monsters bet on who will survive the battles. Fortunately for her, her piece of trash captor knows she is a severe underdog. Under horse in these battles and does his best to fix them in her favor so he can bet on the battles and win a boatload of money. Even still, her mind is fixed on leveling up, kicking in his soft head, and escaping. So, how fun does that sound? Let's get into the prose. This first chapter was a unique read. I think that was part of what made it just so fun, was just how unique and different it was to start with the protagonist that is a horse, who then gains sentience. Maybe that's why this animal evolution thing is blown up. I don't know. Let me know in the comments why you think it's blowing up so much. Kind of like a side point here, side comment. I read Animal Farm for the first time last month, and so maybe only because it's still fresh in my mind, but this gives a feeling of like a modern spin on that. Only time will tell if this fiction also turns out to be an allegory warning against propaganda and the dangers of governments wielding too much power. You never know. Okay, so the next pro for this one, the writing is very snappy and fast-paced. I do love some poetic prose when I'm in the mood for it, but there's something just so satisfying about plain, easy-to-follow language and an engaging story. Next pro, as with any lit RPG or progression story, I'm very eager to see just how far this simple horse girl can go. Never quite thought that would be something that I said, but here I am. I've never read something like this before, but it certainly feels like the sky is the limit for Tachyon. Last pro here, the perfect chapter ending that just leaves the reader hooked and eager to find out what happens next. I may or may not have read 3 or 4 more chapters last night. Cons. Only real con I can see here is one that often pops up with these Royal Road stories that are written kind of quickly, is just some minor grammar issues. Nothing that really caused me any real problems when reading it. I would just assume that this is based on the author blasting this story out to kind of ride this monster evolution wave. When I checked, I want to say it was like it had been written over like the last 10 days or something like that. But other than that, this was a really fun one. Shout out to the author, shout out to all these Monster Girl Evolution authors who have created this strange phenomenon. Alrighty, so our second fiction today on this episode is one called Transiety by R.D. Berger. Tylene is a woman who feels unattractive. She begins this story in couples therapy with her husband Bob. A new technology has been utilized here that allows them to temporarily get into each other's heads. This technology promises to help them save their marriage by allowing them to connect and finally get on the same page. Interesting stuff. In the first chapter, this bond seems to be going well and making them feel better. It seems to be kind of bridging some emotional gap that was there. And so with the help of these therapists and this new technology, Tylene and Bob seem to be able to kind of communicate better and just feel overall better about their marriage. Okay, so let's get to the pros. First, really clear writing and a very fun concept. I suppose that this is going to be the George Orwell episode here, because first I talked about Animal Farm with the first fiction, and now this world building is giving me shades of 1984. It has a sort of dystopian vibe where the government is surveilling society 24/7. So really interesting there. Next pro, the hook in this one, the way I see it is that the chapter seems very positive and optimistic in tone. Nothing bad really happens. Just the world building makes me feel like the story is going to get more dystopian and dramatic, perhaps. So just an interesting start. Maybe I've been watching too much Black Mirror, but it just has me curious to see when this cart is going to go off the rails. Okay, so on to the cons. The only con I can think of may not be a con at all, since I only read the first chapter. It's impossible to say, but the blurb of this fiction is somewhat dark and talks about a government monitoring its citizens, experimental technology with unintended consequences. And after reading the first chapter, and then being curious, so reading the second, it seems like the tone is not dark at all. Really, it feels more heartwarming and slice of life with just like a dash of futurism kind of splashed in there. And again, it's hard to say because I don't know how this story moves. This was only 2 chapters that I read, but I think setting up reader expectation early in a story is super important. So perhaps the story could have a different blurb, or maybe you could have little seeds of what those unintended consequences of the technology or about the overbearing nature of the government kind of dropped in there. And I don't know, so maybe I could be completely off base here. So I don't want to lean too heavily into that. The writing was really nice. It was very like slice of life and kind of left me feeling like just happy, I guess, to see these 2 characters figuring out the differences and like repairing their marriage. It was very like positive. There was a lot of like using this technology based on the first and the second chapter, which I did kind of jump into just because the chapter was a little bit short. So I was like, maybe I'd do 2 chapters just to get a better vibe. But it was kind of neat with them sort of like going through past traumas or like areas they felt their life had kind of maybe not blossomed in the way that they had wanted, and trying to like fulfill some of those unfulfilled dreams through this technology together. And that was like a very heartwarming, I would say, type of thing. So this was a really fun one. Great job by the author. Our third and final fiction for episode 2 is called Department of Otherworld Rescue by Scott Ward. Cole is an experienced soldier, but when he stumbles across a rebel fighter who is in the middle of getting his chest cavity chewed out by a 4-armed creature with teeth like glass, he is rightfully a bit shaken. He does what any good soldier would do and empties a full clip from his M4 carbine into the monster. When that has no effect at all, he hauls ass out of there. Unfortunately, the creature decides it's still hungry and comes chasing after him. Lucky for Cole, his squad is nearby with their military vehicle, and they're able to help him out of this jam. But even when the creature, laying flattened by the MATV, seeing how the sky has turned red, the team now questions whether they're still in Syria. So, let's get to the pros. First, this is a really fun military fiction. I can tell immediately that the author has some military experience based on the lingo. Things like MATVs and M240s and mags of 5.56. Let me be honest with you guys, I know nothing about any of that stuff. But there's nothing better than reading the work of someone who is knowledgeable about something and getting to kind of live through their experiences. Second pro, action-packed. Since I was mentioning earlier the importance of establishing a tone right away, I must say that Scott Warren has done an excellent job at that here. Based on the first chapter, I think it's safe to say this story will involve plenty of military operations and monsters and close calls, all the stuff that we come to love from a page turner like this. Just a real cool, fun adventure with a blistering pace. Third pro, alternative history perhaps? He had a line I loved about the creature being from Saddam's secret nuclear weapons lab. Now let's be real, I'm an idiot, but it got me giddy. I love little twists on history like this. It makes me think of things like the occult Nazi experiments in Hellboy or something like that. I love it when people take stuff from history and kind of can twist it into like a fun fantasy or sci-fi way. Just personally, that's something I really enjoy. So let's get to the cons. No real cons for me on this one. I'd like to keep reading this one just to see how it unfolds. It has a super badass cover. Kind of reminds me of like a Final Fantasy or like a JRPG cover. It looks really cool. Maybe the only con would be, obviously, if you aren't a fan of military adventures or lots of actions, maybe skip this one, because it seems like that's kind of what's going on here. But, you know, like we were kind of talking about earlier, when you establish the tone right away as an author, you can kind of signpost to your reader what they can expect from this. Whether they're gonna like it, whether they're not gonna like it. Alrighty, well, that is it for episode 2. Thanks for tuning in. As always, links to these fictions will be in the description below if you want to read them. Please like, subscribe, share the video with friends, and wherever your reading journey takes you, I hope that it's wonderful. Cheers!